Good afternoon, everybody. This is Martin Gershon, and I am thrilled to be here on another weekly series event, BetterHealth, with an incredible featured speaker, Allan May, who is the chairman of Life Science Angels, and a number of other important positions, which he will tell you about. And we are here today to talk about incredible innovation and technologies in healthcare, but through the lens of two people who have been in the business on the investor, on the entrepreneurial side for several decades, with some practical points of view about how companies are viewed by investors, some of the success stories that are embedded in this, and what does it mean for you as an individual that science, medicine, technology, innovation, and a huge onslaught of liquidity is reshaping our healthcare system? So, with that, first, let me turn it over to Allan just to say a quick hello. Perhaps he can tell you a little bit about his background, and that will give you some sense of where we're going, with the conversation. So, let me shift it over to you, Allan. Allan, welcome.
Well, hey, Martin. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you here. I would like you perhaps to spend just a minute to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. You have tremendous experience in healthcare, particularly in medical technology. You are running an incredible VR company, and I would love, I would love for you just to spend a second to tell us a little bit about yourself, so we have a perspective on that, and then we can move into some of the topics at hand.
Thanks. Happy to do that, and I'll keep it high level and short. So I started this as an investor, and then as you always do, you fall in love with a couple of them. So you end up being CEO of this or that, or chairman of this or that. So I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a CEO. I've been the guy asking for money. Then I became the guy giving money. And then I go on boards of directors and help run the companies that have the money. So it gives you a sense of perspective of the different roles that are relevant to these companies and how they all work. It gives you the viewpoint and what's important and what's different between those views. So the key to all of that is no matter what your technology is and no matter how cool it is and what it does, if it doesn't get adopted, it doesn't help patients. And the reason we're doing healthcare rather than mining satellites and making apps for fashion is because we want to cure cancer. We want to cure Alzheimer's, and that's our goal. And so the way to do that is to get to patients, and the way to do that is to understand technology and business models and how they work together to attract investors like you and I, and then help those companies navigate their way into the healthcare system.
Fantastic overview. I couldn't agree more. As a physician, the first thing I want to do is drive better healthcare.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Allan and I have talked about is the integration of science, medicine, and technology rests on one important thing: really listening to the companies out there, what they want to invest in, listening to patients, what they need, listening to doctors and other healthcare providers to understand where the shortfalls are in the healthcare system. And through that listening process, coupled with great entrepreneurial verve and investor liquidity, there is a potential to really reshape healthcare. And I personally have never seen anything like it in several decades. So let me first start with a little bit of a presentation here, which really kind of underscores the theme that one of the drivers in this listening process is the technology aspect. And within that, certainly AI is going to be a dominant force in the process, of reshaping healthcare. How that integrates is the topic of conversation for Allan and I today, because I think we're both in agreement that technology, just for the sake of technology, is not effective. Technology has to be driven into a business model that does something to improve the efficiencies and cost effectiveness and deliverables for healthcare. So, one of the things that I think is true within the investor community, as echoed in this quote from Andreessen Horowitz, general partner, is that AI does enable scientists and other healthcare professionals to develop incredible new products and services. But that ability has to be coupled with incredible teams and leaders and thinkers, and it can't stand alone in isolation. So I just want to shift back on a more personal note, Allan. This notion that technology in and of itself stands alone in isolation seems to me to be kind of a false promise. The notion that AI alone is going to drive everything without, as we talked about, the integration of a real business model, a real understanding about how we can drive down costs in healthcare. Where are the pain points? And so I would like to ask you your thoughts and comments on this particular point. And if you see some companies in your field of vision that are integrating some of these ideas into incredible business models that are really impacting healthcare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The key point, of course, is that healthcare, the healthcare, what we call the healthcare system, a seventh of our economy, is the most inefficient portion of our economy. The result of that is no one is happy with the system the way they are. It's a beautiful convergence of opportunity from almost every perspective. Providence Healthcare had 29 billion in revenue last year. They lost $900 million. If you can't make money driving 29 billion in revenue, what is that telling you about the business that you're in, right? So what it's telling you, what it's telling entrepreneurs is take cost out of the healthcare system. So your technology, whatever it is, needs to reduce, significantly reduce, not 5% less, 10% less, whatever the procedure, whatever the area of practice that you're in, 50%. Take real cost out of the healthcare system, make it more efficient, make the physician more efficient, and the patient better. So it's cost effective patient. It's not just better patient outcomes. It's cost effective patient outcomes. That's where your technology needs to go. So we were talking briefly about virtual reality just a minute ago, and wow, virtual reality, that's an incredible technology for anybody who's experienced, right? But how can it possibly impact healthcare? What role could it have? Well, think about introducing new products, complicated new products. We're talking about heart valves, neuro implants, things that are very complicated and have what's called a learning curve, which means how long it takes the doctor to get proficient at using it. Well, learning curve means suboptimal outcomes for patients. If the learning curve is 50 patients, that means 50 people didn't get the outcomes that they should have gotten from that device or that procedure. Virtual reality can do a digital twin of that procedure that allows the physician to practice as much as they need to practice so that when they do their first patient, they're at the top of their learning curve and therefore achieve those optimal outcomes sooner. That's what the technology can do. It's about your mother or your daughter having that procedure and having a physician who is trained more accurately and better so that their outcome is better. And incidentally, it costs less to do that than it does to send a bunch of physicians to training courses take them out of their practices, pay for all of that, and still not get any objective data on how they're doing. This is purely objective data as well. So there's a classic example of technology, cost out of the system, better for
Mhm.
patients.
No, that's a fantastic example because it really is an integration of technology and a sound business model and kind of looking to the future. One of the things I do want to look at is some of the drivers of innovation and some of the drivers of entrepreneurship. Alan and I have both started quite a number of businesses, and it does require amazing teams. It requires amazing leadership, and it does require liquidity. So I'm going to pull up a slide here to talk about the advancement of some of these entrepreneurial investment efforts. Let's just get this up. So we're looking at a $14 trillion US market, which represents probably 50% of the global market, maybe a little bit less. So the market size is huge. The drivers of this new market have shifted, which is one of the themes about BetterHealth, that the major tech companies are throwing incredible liquidity into this because they see abilities to integrate their core competencies. They're fast moving, they leverage the core competencies that they have with deep pockets.
Hmm.
There's four main areas that they're looking at. And we've talked a little bit about this in some prior episodes, but I don't think it's um, uh, really undue to redo some of the conversations that we've had. So, looking at big data, looking at drug discovery, looking at digital health and wearable sensors is part of an overriding theme. And that theme, which is what Alan and I talked about earlier, is listening to the needs of the system. The system requires more efficiency, more cost effectiveness, and more personalized healthcare. Now, within this, it's important to understand where the money is flowing. And it is this integration between disruptive scientific medical innovations and business fundamentals that is driving businesses. And I think Alan's point is that as a business entrepreneur, it is critical for you to really put together from an early stage a sound business model. Now, part of this is being driven by incredible liquidity. At Endeavor, we've done research which is backed by McKinsey, which looks at liquidity compared to other sectors, and it shows 5 to 10x greater liquidity being driven into the healthcare sector. If we look at some investment profiles of early stage investments, we also see a consistent growth in investment in early stage investments. This continues, although somewhat subdued, even in the economic downturn that we're in right now. And one other point, part of this process, which brings big tech to the table, is also changing the way that big pharma and med tech and biotech are looking at entry and exit points. And there is a collaborative element in this new environment, which is driving much of the new investments. Before we go on, I'd like to go back and speak to Alan about how is that money being used? Is it driving innovation for innovation's sake? Is it coupled with strategic thinkers developing new business models? And so one of the things that you had mentioned, which is greater efficiencies, brings me to one terrific company, which is Nuance. And so Nuance and Epic are the two 800-pound gorillas in the electronic healthcare record space. Nuance was a $19.6 billion purchase by Microsoft a few years ago, and Epic is a new investment by Google Ventures. The focus of both of these is exactly what you're saying, Allan, which is listen to the patient, listen to the healthcare provider, and put together a business model that's going to create economic efficiencies. This process now allows physicians and patients to sit side by side without the physician at his computer or her computer, really connect and understand what the problem is and integrate some of the core laboratory work, medical record keeping, prescription writing, all into one automated system. On the med tech side, which I know is a very big focus of yours, do you see companies that are integrating into this world where they are going to be using any type of technologies to integrate some of their findings? So, for example, colonoscopy has been reshaped by Cosmo and their recent, over the past couple of years, collaboration with Medtronic, where AI is now embedded in colonoscopy, increasing effectiveness up to 93%. Do you see other early stage companies looking at this integration? And if so, where do you see that going?
Yeah, absolutely. So eh, the idea of partnership itself is novel for medtech. If you look
Yep.
historically, Medtronic and Boston Scientific and Johnson & Johnson weren't known for partnering, right? They were known for competing. And 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 this whole idea of let's not do it all ourselves, let's work together. That's a big tech idea that has come into healthcare. And now you're seeing these collaborations in a much more open way by all of these companies, which itself is a great example of this. The the driver, the biggest driver we have going is obviously cost of the healthcare system. It has to come down. It's simple as that. It has to come down. So because of that, everyone is now focused on how to get that out, and the way to get that out is to use technology to shift procedures out of the most expensive settings into lesser expensive settings, right? And so eventually being like 10 years into the future, more or less, the only thing that will be done in hospitals are complex procedures. Everything else will have been shifted out to less expensive settings. And as much of that as they can get into your home will go into your home. And your slides point that out very eloquently. Guess where tech plays is on your body and in your home. So the real core strengths of tech are going to show up more and more as that healthcare shift accelerates, and you and your home become a healthcare part of the system, become part of the healthcare system.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. You really set me up perfectly for the next slide here. So, Apple and wearable sensors and digital health are not just about innovation. And I think I want to repeat that theme over and over. It's the practical utilization of that technology. And it's the thematic shift, as Alan was saying, from an expensive environment, which is a hospital or a physician's office, to at home. That shift has a huge healthcare economic impact. It also impacts another group of people, which is the preventative healthcare segment of health and wellness. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at this. According to Tim Cook, healthcare could be Apple's greatest legacy. And I think that that really underscores Another important theme in this series, long-term sustainability of healthcare as an outperformer, as an investment class over a long period of time. Because the market is growing, the liquidity is growing, the drive from the largest corporations is there and committed. They have put together at Apple an incredibly comprehensive plan. And perhaps Allan could speak a little bit about the top category, which is AR VR. And then, of course, throughout the series, we're going to talk about the digital health category, the machine learning and AI category, as 3 out of the 4 main growth areas for Apple. So I'm going to shift it back to Allan and have him talk a little bit about his company and some of the things that we began to talk about the incredible possibilities for digital twin technology, virtual reality, and how that is a very viable new piece of technology that has a business model embedded in it that it is going to create a more effective, efficient, and cost-effective system.
Absolutely. So if you look at immersive technologies now, and their impact. Number one, they play in hospitals, which, as we just said, is the most expensive healthcare setting. So they're in the right area to take out costs. The ability to the effectiveness of it is now being proven. Physicians if spend their entire careers, pre-careers, in 2D settings, looking at books, looking at films, looking at X-rays, looking at CT scans, and then mentally are taught to convert that into 3D, which is what they'll do on you and your children for the rest of their lives, right? I've always marveled at how they learn that way and yet are able to make those 3D inferences. VR now is 3D. It is haptics. It is those inferences all at once. To learn in 3D is astonishing. Physicians and physician trainees all prefer it, virtually all prefer it over existing training methods. And then skills transfer, where the most, not the new physicians trying to do their first knee or first interventional procedure, but the more complex, the newest products, the most complex interventional procedures, the ability to do that in a virtual space with haptic feedback that puts you in a position to go into the operating suite the next day to do that procedure, then using augmented reality during the procedure to have the patient's scans and patient information up on the screen, as well as the live images and feedback, is a huge advance in surgery, and will certainly be tied. The data, the studies need to be done, and the proof needs to come in. But certainly, they will reduce healthcare costs. They will reduce adverse events. They will shorten hospital stays. They will shorten procedure time. It's going to have an amazing impact on costs and hospitals and the healthcare system.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I want to take a moment just to thank our audience. There's quite a lot of comments. People are really logging in from all over the world. Please say hi if you're there and tell us where you're from. And I would like to just acknowledge a few of the comments that are out there. Thank you, Harvey, for signing on, and Steve and Nikhil. I want to thank you for your comments. Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you very much, Martin, for some of these thoughtful comments. So some of the things that I would like to answer live here really is about the young entrepreneur. And we've been asked, what are some of the things in this incredible growth environment, that an entrepreneur should look for as they're starting up? What are some of the things that are important as fundamental building blocks for a venture in healthcare startup?
So I'll take that as a question.
Yes, it is.
So I to me, it boils down to clinical needs and business model. right? First, make sure you have a substantial unmet clinical need. Substantial means market is big enough to ramp and scale the company. That's what that part of it means. So you can't have an experience today in healthcare and not walk out of there saying that could have been better. So the clinical needs are all over the place. You need to find ones that are compelling, that is large enough to build a company around, which puts you at the second phase, business model. So when you have the clinical need and when you have the solution to that clinical need, now you need to figure out how to get paid and where the money is in the system. Where is it reimbursed? Is it not reimbursed? Is it part of the hospital expense or not part of the hospital expense? How is it taking costs out of the healthcare system? And how are you going to show that? You can't walk into hospitals and say, we reduce costs, because every technology, every company walking in says, we reduce costs. The next question is going to be, well, show us the studies that you've done proving that you reduce costs. So as the entrepreneur, that's the question you're going to have to answer. So as you're putting your business and revenue model together, you need to be figuring out what clinical studies you need to be running, what endpoints you need to hit, and why those endpoints tie to taking cost out of the system. If you can do that, if you have that clinical need and can articulate your business model in that manner, you're highly likely to get financed.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would add, my background is as a former FDA attorney and a CEO of a clinical research organization. It's all about the data, it's all about doing things correctly. And in my experience as an investor and as an entrepreneur, it is very important to have the right collaboration partnerships, whether it's with the FDA or government regulatory bodies early in the process, or whether it's with strategic partners who potentially could be financial partners down the road. Having people to assist and create an ecosystem that you can plug your company into and get feedback. And I think that's what Allan is underscoring. It's this notion of doing, testing, verifying, repeat, and rinse, and then getting that information, which is really, first the ability to prove what you say can be done, and then the sustainability of that is the business model. So I think that one of the things that I would say to answer the question is, it's never too early to play the long game. Even in seed and Series A level companies, the traditional thinking for years has been, until we reach a certain milestone in top line revenue, none of the large companies are interested in talking with us. In my experience, there is a paradigm shift with new corporate accelerators that are run by Sanofi, that are run by Pfizer, that are run by Roche and Boehringer Ingelheim. These are companies that have put many, many billions of dollars into a pot. And I can just tell you concretely, in the past year, Sanofi in their accelerator has invested in 80 early stage companies. And the last investment that they've made in one of these companies was $1.2 billion.
Hmm.
So the relationships that have existed in the past are different than the relationships going forward. Let's skate to where the puck is going, not where it is right now. And where the puck is going, and I think, Allan, you can chime in on this, which would be fantastic, is about collaboration. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but collaboration now between pharma partners, med tech partners, and even partners who normally would not be investing together are reshaping where the money is going. And that was one of the questions that we had from one of our attendees, is, where is the money going? So if you could talk a little bit about the collaboration aspect, and I'll talk a little bit about where the money is going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The way really to think about the healthcare system is medtech is now following the pharma model. If you look at pharma over the last decade, you've pretty much seen them backtrack out of R&D. And why have they backtracked R&D? Because out of the tens of billions of dollars they spent on R&D, they didn't get any drugs and they didn't get any biologic. And it's much easier for them to buy successful biologic companies than it is to do R&D. That's
Mhm.
just the way it has come out. So medtech is going the same direction. They they understand that what they're good at is marketing and selling products, getting them through the FDA, getting them reimbursed, and using their gigantic manufacturing, sales, and marketing muscle to drive those into the system. What they can't do is innovate. They know that. And that's your job. That's why we're here. That's how we can all make money, right? So you go back 10 years ago, and the idea of having a strategic in your Series A was unheard of. It would be a sign of weakness, right? It would be you couldn't raise money from normal sources. Now, we would love to have a strategic in our Series A. It's a validation. It's an extra peg that shows you that commercialization is possible. And so anything that speaks to that commercial pathway is a super plus. So there's a classic change in the system itself.
I could not agree with you more. And I would add something to that, which is many times CEOs are in love with their product and they're too close to that. They can't see beyond the product. So, what collaboration partners often do is they generate a different POV to develop new profit centers and new revenue streams. And I can tell you concretely one case study: a company out of Europe that had a wearable sensor that had a subscription model that Endeavor was working with, where there was a low fee per patient per month. And there was really little chance that that company was going to accelerate growth and achieve unicorn status ever. But they were happy with that. We combined forces with several other collaboration partners and embedded into this wearable sensor that was designed specifically to alert healthcare providers about the fall risk for elderly patients in nursing care and long-term care facilities with a new cardiac and respiratory and metabolic sensor that allowed us to track cardiac function, respiratory function, pulse oximetry, sleep patterns. We were able to track compliance with medication, and we took that information and we used AI to generate information about many aspects of the care of that patient, which then drew another whole revenue stream from that as we partnered with large pharma companies, and we partnered with med tech companies, and we partnered with insurance companies. And we then brought that out in outside the healthcare system into the workman's compensation system, because many of the workers who were in dangerous work environments also could benefit from an awareness of dangerous fall risk or dangerous injury. So the ability to see outside of your own box is embedded in collaboration, so long as that collaboration is authentic and creative.
One of the things that I like to help entrepreneurs with is to just think about business model. You know, a lot of the entrepreneurs out there are engineers or postdocs or researchers, and they're really good at the engineering and science and research, and they just haven't been taught business models. They just haven't been taught commercialization, so they're a little bit less good at that. And the really key point is it's not a black box. It's not a Latin mass. It's in fact something you can use the scientific method on, just like you use the scientific method to make your discovery. You can do that with your business model. You form a hypothesis, you quantify some metrics to test that hypothesis. You run your tests and you look at the results. If they don't confirm your hypothesis, you make the changes that you need to make in your hypothesis until they do. You can do that exactly with regulatory approval, with reimbursement, with partnerships and ramping and scaling. You can hypothesize where's the revenue going to come from, who are you going to partner with, what are you going to do, and then you go out and you talk to them and you ask them if it's pure. So it's more rigor and scientific discovery than it is mystery. It just takes as much work as your original engineering or research breakthrough took, and it's not going to be something that comes overnight or easily. It's going to take hard work.
I completely agree. Let's take a closer look for a second at some of this transition from hospital and office into home care. So, Apple is going to dominate in this space with home diagnostics. And it's estimated by McKinsey that 265 billion of healthcare services is going to shift from traditional hospitals and office to home within a couple of years. Those numbers to me are staggering. Companies, which we've mentioned somewhat before in conversations, include novel new vocal biomarkers. They include companies like Cordio that are looking at major diseases like congestive heart failure. They're looking at taking infectious disease and the ability to use polymerase, polymerase chain reaction techniques, which are hospital level at home with a plug and play system with the iPhone. And they're looking at one of the most treatable diseases, skin cancer, with the ability to scan your body and upload it so that there can be an integrated analysis between AI healthcare providers and pathologists. There's also long-term chronic diseases that are being looked at, like Parkinson's disease. So this allows an empowerment of the patient. It allows a cost effectiveness, and embedded in this, as Allan keeps really, I think, pointing to, is a core business model. And that business model is what's attracting this integration of players, because they do see that the risk that's involved in prior healthcare ventures, and this is important for angels as well as other groups, that risk has been mitigated by the length of time it takes to go to market and the amount of money that's necessary to drive into these growing markets. So let me stop there and shift back to Allan, because he is one of the preeminent angel capital investors. And it is my firm belief that the angels are the tip of the spear very often. They are the high risk group because they come in earlier than most groups. And so part of what I would like to better understand is where you see the angel community enrolling in some of these new ventures. And healthcare is such a highly technical area that sometimes it's been difficult for angel groups that aren't as specific as yours, with as expertise in healthcare, to wrap their arms around healthcare investment. So, what do you see over the next 5+ years in terms of organizations like the Angel Capital Association and other angel groups that you work with recognizing this shift and this trend?
Yeah, you put your finger on it. It's uh, a lot of investors, particularly tech investors, just have a hard time with the idea that you can find a need, you can find a solution, you can build it, and it works and it's cost effective, but it's illegal to sell it, which is what we deal with in healthcare every day. You have to have FDA approval, and you have to go through a rigorous process that allows you to actually put it on the market. And then, incidentally, someone needs to pay for it because it's not going to be the patient. And so now you need reimbursement. And so, yeah, that whole system makes it difficult for angels and intimidating, frankly, for a number of the angel groups to do it. So I've been working with ACA, and this year at the conference in Las Vegas in May, they're going to have a track dedicated to healthcare, where specifically we're going to try to bring together those interested individuals in the various angel groups for exactly the purpose of forming some critical mass, ability to syndicate, ability to take more control of those early stage deals, and have a better impact and a better chance of liquidity with that syndication. All of our deals, one of the other differences between tech and med tech is $500,000 or $1 million won't turn up a milestone that improves enterprise value in med tech. Every study or experiment or objective you're gonna try to hit is going to cost a couple $1 million. So typically, angel groups are going to have to syndicate together to get you there, and we're working on that. We're working on putting those angel groups together. So definitely put ACA on your radar for the May annual meeting, and look at and come to the life science sessions that we're going to have there. Look at that. The scope of this. I was looking at data last night from, I forget if it was PitchBook or CB Insights, whichever it was, but the top CVCs, the top corporate venture capital groups, to get on that chart for top corporate venture capital investors, 3 deals was enough to put you in that category. Every one of our angel groups is doing 10 deals, 15 deals in healthcare. It's way more scale and scope than that. And if we're able to pull more of those groups together and more effectively syndicate, it has a far bigger impact on both on your investment portfolio as an investor, as well as the healthcare system in terms of producing good companies.
Absolutely. And I would really give a shout out to those entrepreneurs and corporations out there. On the entrepreneur side, please contact me or Alan or both of us if you have a great company and you have great ideas, you're looking for collaboration partners. I think that there is an ecosystem that Alan and I overlap with that we can perhaps guide you or give you some advice or help you. On the corporate side, and this will be a follow on conversation in the Better Health series, I certainly urge those corporations out there in med tech, in pharma, in other areas in healthcare. If you're looking again for collaboration partners, there is an ecosystem that's being built out, which incorporates early stage accelerators, angel investors, academic centers, later stage VCs, and now corporate accelerators, which I mentioned earlier, that are being really driven all over the world: Paris, the Midwest, Tel Aviv. It's really becoming a new game. And so, love to hear from all of you and get your thoughts about how you are integrating or want to integrate in some of the things that Alan is doing with Life Science Angels, what Angel Capital Association is doing, and what Endeavor is doing. So, once again, it has been an extraordinary pleasure to be with everyone here. Alan, do you have any last thoughts or comments about some of the themes that are going to drive the next view on healthcare and what people can look for going down the road as it impacts them personally?
Yeah, it's so important that these technologies improve life, improve the quality of life. It's one of the reasons that people like us are in healthcare is when you're with the patient, when you're in the room, when it's just the two of you, and there's that mental connection, and they need help, and they know you can help them, and you intend to do that. That's why we do this instead of investing in other things. So look for the ones that really have impacts on people, on your family, and look for the ones that also take costs out of the healthcare system. If you do those two things, you will be benefiting mankind and yourself, and incidentally making money all at the same time. So good luck with that. And hope you, as Martin said, reach out to us if you think you have a great idea and you're an entrepreneur with a company. Please, that's what we're in the business of looking for and working with.
Alan, I can't thank you enough for this 45 minutes of real exciting interactive conversation. The list of comments and questions is growing. I'll send you some of them, so feel free to respond. Quite a number are centered around the ACA and how people can get involved. So, for all of those out there that have logged on, thank you. I see people from many different countries, a host of different questions. We will try to get to as many of them as possible in follow up. Please tune in next week where we have a very exciting woman CEO, entrepreneur, founder. As I said in our last webinar, we will be breaking the month of webinar discussions into 4 parts. One of those parts, which Endeavor feels quite strongly about, is diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing women and minority CEO, entrepreneur, founders. Next week, you will hear from one of those with an incredible new medical device. Perhaps, Alan, you can tune in since that's your forte. And from there, it's just onwards and upwards in terms of incredible guests. So please consider subscribing. You can subscribe at gershoncapital.com to our newsletter, which keeps you up to date with events and keeps you plugged into the recordings that are on the LinkedIn page. I want to thank everyone again for tuning in, and thank you, Alan, once again. I look forward to our next weekly Better Health series next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Martin.